Good morning, everybody. This is such a great crowd in here, and I'm looking at you, and y'all are all leaders that I know of, so maybe you can have some good engaging questions for our presenter. And I think our first session was great, so thank you all for being here. We really appreciate Josh Cherry sharing his information. And I just want to give David Lee, who's Edward Jones guru, who's our tech guy today. And I mean, I kind of want to give him a round of applause because this all.
I told you my job is
Him. So our esteemed speaker, Carla E. Alsandor, Ph.D. She's a senior director at USTMAX Center, a micro campus of University of St. Thomas. Dr. Alsandor joined UST in 2018 as Director of Alumni Relations. She became the Senior Director of Donor and Alumni Relations and served as Interim Director of Advancement Services before moving into her current role, where she oversees all aspects of USTMAX, a marketing, recruiting, and academic center in Conroe, Texas. Have you all been there? Has anybody seen that? I think it's very impressive. In addition to her work in Catholic education, she served as a fundraiser and program manager for health-related nonprofits, co-owned a real estate investment and management firm, and held for-profit positions in marketing, sales, public relations, and program management in California, Louisiana, and Texas. She holds an MBA and Ph.D. in leadership studies. Dr. Alsandor is active in the greater Houston community, serving on various boards and committees. She's a member of St. Anthony of Padua Church in the Woodlands. So let's welcome our esteemed speaker, Dr. Alsandor.
Thank you so much, Anne. My goodness, with an introduction like that, I hope I can live up to the hype. Good morning, everyone. This is a great group. It's so nice to see all of you here today. Thank you for choosing to join us for this particular breakout session this morning. I know you had choices, and so I appreciate you being here with me this morning. As Anne said, my name is Carla, and I am the Senior Director of the USTMAX Center. I have to point this.
Well, let's just start. Wasn't it working a minute ago? Tested it.
I promise I didn't touch it. I did
Will the keyboard work there?
Yeah, there it is. There's something with the Zoom. It does, the keyboard does work if you need that. Okay, now it's working.
Yay.
Okay, your leadership styles playbook, take 2. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for those of you who are joining us via Zoom this morning. It's my pleasure to be here and to present at the first business summit for the Women's Chamber. As I was saying, my name is Carla, and I am the Senior Director of the USTMAX Center. USTMAX is a microcampus of the University of St. Thomas. The University of St. Thomas, which is located in the heart of Houston, has been around for 75 years. The USTMAX Center has been open for just over 1 year, and we're located in the heart of downtown Conroe. We invite you to learn more about USTMAX Center by visiting our website, ustmax.com, or you can follow us at USTMAX Center. That would be our pleasure for you to get to know more about us. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. We're here to talk about your leadership style playbook. And I put this presentation together in the hopes that by the time we're done, you will have gleaned some new ideas or reinforced some ideas that you might have already had about leadership that you can put into play within your organizations, within your businesses, with your teammates. And as followers as well, I would hope that you would find some things here that are useful to you and understanding a little bit more about the dynamics that go into good leader-follower relationships. I'm going to talk about several different leadership styles this morning. There are many leadership styles out there, many theories that have been studied on the subject of leadership. We're going to talk about 5 of those today. Some of them are shown here on this graphic. So we'll talk about transformational and transactional leadership, democratic leadership, which is also referred to as participative leadership. We'll get a little bit into situational leadership and also servant leadership at the end. Let's start with transactional leadership. This graphic shows you that there are some specific components to what makes for good transactional leadership. And we'll start with the one in the middle, contingent reward. We'll talk about all 5 of these, but contingent reward is telling us that as a transactional leader, what you're doing is you're making it possible for your followers to be motivated because they know that there's something for them in the end. It's a transaction. Transactional leadership is often thought of as management, if you will. So a transactional leader is going to make sure that the followers on his or her team are motivated through incentives. They are going to have some sort of reward at the end of the process. So this reward might take the shape of a bonus, if you will. You know, you hit your marks, you hit your targets, you meet your goals, there's a bonus for you at the end. That's a motivating factor for many members of this type of management. It could be in the form of, you work on commissions and you know that your commissions will be more if you do better. So that's a contingent reward. Some offer trips and other prizes and things like that, contingent marks. Transactional leadership is often found in sales environments. You can imagine that that's a very popular way to keep people motivated. Extrinsic motivation is very much a part of what we're talking about here, where the followers or the team members are motivated because they know there's something in it for them, versus an intrinsic motivator, which would be something more along the lines of self-gratification. You know you're doing good, you know that you're better in yourself and you're better in the community because of what you do, and you're motivated because of that. But in a transactional leadership environment, it's all about the extrinsic motivations. And transactional leaders are interested in maintaining status quo because what they're doing is they're interested in hitting the targets and the marks that are important for them to hit to meet their goals right now in the today. They're not spending much time looking forward, being visionary, thinking about the future and the ways that they can improve or grow the business down the line. Someone else is going to have to be thinking about those things because a transactional leader is all about what do we have to do right now to hit our marks and make our success happen. They're short-term focused. So just as a bit of a review or a summary of what a transactional leader is all about, they promise rewards in exchange for effort and good performance. They watch for and take actions when deviations occur from rules and procedures. They only intervene sometimes with the transactional leadership environment. They're only going to intervene when standards are not being met. Okay, this is like management by exception. They're not worried about anything with their teammates unless something goes wrong. They see that standards aren't being met, goals aren't being met, then they'll jump in and intervene. And oftentimes that's because the transactional leader, him or herself, is busy trying to meet their own goals, right? So they're looking for team members that can just be self-starters and get out there and get it done. And at the very far end of the spectrum of a transactional leadership model, there are those leaders that avoid making any decisions at all. This is when you get into the area that's often referred to as laissez-faire leadership, the lack of leadership. They're so busy doing their own thing, you're kind of on your own. You're a member of a team where the transactional leader is a laissez-faire leader. That's at the very far end of that spectrum. That's when you get into the mode of, there's not really a lot of leadership going on here at all. Right? So let's move on now to transformational leadership. This is probably not a new concept to any of you, but I'd like to break it down based on the way that the model is designed, the theory of transformational leadership, which is broken down into these 4 different areas: inspirational motivation, intellectual stimulation, idealized influence, and individualized consideration. Excuse me, let me, thank you. I'm going to use my notes on this one because I'd like to make sure that I cover each one of these areas. A transformational leader, unlike a transactional leader, is forward thinking, is going to be more visionary and looking for members of the team that are going to be inspired by the idea that they can help make something better and grow an organization or a business through the ability to really be a part of the team, to follow behind a transformational leader because they are influential and motivational and inspiring. So let's talk first about idealized influence. This aspect of transformational leadership includes, first of all, the leader being very charismatic. They're the type of leader that you just want to follow. You want to be more like, you want to emulate them. They're charismatic in their personality. They influence others to be more like them, and they act as a positive role model. Idealized influence also tells us that this type of a leader is willing to take risks. However, they're not willing to go outside of the realm of their own core values and their ethical principles and taking those risks. That's part of what makes them so inspiring, and part of what makes others want to be more like them, because they're true to their values. They're very trustworthy. And then in the area called inspirational motivation, transformational leaders inspire confidence in others. They inspire a sense of purpose in their followers. They articulate a very clear vision for the future. And that's really important. If you're following with a transformational leader, you know that you're going to have a real clear vision of what's ahead, because a transformational leader is going to make sure that you're well apprised of that. They clearly communicate their expectations to the group as well. Transformational leadership does not mean that it's all touchy-feely. They're there to get the job done as well. And they're going to make sure that you know exactly what those expectations are. They're committed to the goals. They display a sense of authority, and they display optimism and enthusiasm on an ongoing basis. It's very important in order to continue to be inspirational for your leader to be upbeat and positive and enthusiastic in the day-to-day. There might be some really hard stuff going on in the background, but a transformational leader is able to compartmentalize in a way that allows them to still present to their team in that very positive manner. Okay, intellectual stimulation. This is a very important part of transformational leadership, in my opinion, a very important part of any style of leadership. To be able to stimulate intellectually those members of your team. You want your team to grow and improve and advance in their own careers. So a transformational leader values creativity and autonomy among followers. They are not going to micromanage. So if you're interested in being a micromanaged environment where someone is there to tell you exactly what to do, when to do it, how to do it, and when to stop doing it, you don't want to be led by a transformational leader, because they're not going to do that. Okay? They solicit ideas from their followers. They're open to hearing and listening and learning from their followers. They're not at all intimidated by that. They want followers on their team or team members who are able to speak up and make their ideas and their voice heard. They involve them in the decision-making process. We'll talk more about that particular aspect of this when we get into participative leadership. Transformational leaders also challenge assumptions. This type of leader isn't going to just bring their own personal paradigm to the table and have that be what directs them in the decision-making process or what guides them in the decision-making process. They're going to challenge assumptions, and they're going to encourage their team members to do the same. And then they do avoid criticizing their team. It doesn't mean that corrective action doesn't take place when needed, but a transformational leader is all about bringing their team members up and encouraging them and supporting them and making them feel valued and important as they are, without doing a lot of criticizing or any of it possible. And then finally, individualized consideration. This is talking about recognizing specific needs and desires of team members. Every one of us is an individual. Every one of us brings to the table our own individual place that we are in life. We bring our own paradigms in there as well. But this is really telling us that a transformational leader is going to be able to recognize that. They're going to be intuitive. And we'll talk more about this too when we get into situational leadership in a few minutes. A transformational leader is going to know what motivates their team members. Okay, and this is done by getting to know team members, talking with them, learning about them, observing how they are, what they bring with them into the workplace. And also, oftentimes people say a little bit of eavesdropping to kind of know what's going on at the water cooler conversations, to find out what those motivators are and what those intrinsic as well as extrinsic motivators are for their followers, so that they can in turn consider how to best help that person on their team improve and succeed and advance. And then finally, under individualized consideration, we transformational leader will provide opportunities for team members to grow and become fulfilled in their position. And that's a really important piece of this. Not just to grow so that they can help the organization do better and get stronger, but also grow so that they have more gratification and satisfaction in the work that they're doing within that organization, so that they are a happy employee. So just to summarize and review a little bit for transformational leadership, they lead by example, they set clear expectations, they challenge the status quo, they encourage learning and growth. They empower others to flourish and succeed and motivate followers to go above and beyond. Just the basic, the minimum of what's required. Followers of transformational leaders are often inspired to go above and beyond. And then they do inspire a shared vision and that desire to reach those new heights. So in comparing the two styles of leadership that we've touched on so far this morning, you can see here the transactional leader. He's autocratic, he's motivational via incentives, he's performance focused and practical, and they are very much process managers. This is a really important style of leadership that comes into play in many organizations for many reasons. And in some instances, it's within an organization that might otherwise be one that's led by transformational leaders, but under certain circumstances, a transformational leader might have to be a little bit transactional. COVID-19 has shown us that. Josh talked about it this morning. Sometimes you gotta hunker down just to survive and focus on today, not so much on tomorrow. The transformational leaders are those that are focused, looking a little bit farther out. They're visionaries, they're inspirational, they're enthusiastic, motivational, and they are indeed change agents. Now let's talk about this one, situational leadership. This is a really great form of leadership that I hope you'll all learn something a little bit new about this morning. It's not a new concept by any means. And I would suspect that many of you, if not all of you in this room, are engaged in some form of situational leadership. Let me stop here for just a moment and ask a question of you all. By show of hands, how many of you in the room consider yourselves to be leaders? And how many of you consider yourselves to be followers? I'm waiting for every hand to go up. Because everyone, I posit, in this room is at some points in time a leader and at some points in time a follower. No matter what you do or what level of any organization you are in some aspect of your life also a follower. This conversation doesn't limit itself to just the workplace. I mean, if you live in a city, presumably you follow those laws and regulations. There's a leader. Some places, not the Woodlands, there are mayors. And so this is something for you to think about as you go through your day-to-day experiences. It's like you're followers. I'm a follower of Jesus Christ. I'm a follower of what my father taught me. My mother's still alive. She's the matriarch. I'm the follower of my boss. I have team members who are followers of me, so I'm also a leader. But in our world, in our lives, we are leaders and followers. And in our responsibilities as leaders, oftentimes we find ourselves in positions where we can take some ideas from situational leadership and put them into play. And so this is going to break it down for you. This graphic over here on this side of the screen that's broken down into 4 quadrants is the model of situational leadership. And I'm going to go through it with you quickly here. I don't want to get too, educate too much like we're in a classroom here, but it is helpful to understand the theories behind some of these leadership models. And so on the bottom, the one that says S1, the red square, what we have here are 4 different quadrants of different situations that a leader might find himself or herself in. And overlaying that, the ribbon, is the action or the reaction that leader would have to those particular situations. So let's think about this as if we're talking about one particular follower on a team. A leader has a follower that's in situation number 1. That follower or that team member is in a position of needing a great deal of direction and a great deal of day-to-day, like this is what you have to do right now. The leader is not in a supportive mode with this person. This leader is in it, okay, this is what we're doing. It's more transactional, like we said before. This is what you need to do right now. This is the expectation that I have for you. Please get this done, and then let's talk about it, see how it went, and then we'll take the next step after that. In situation 1, oftentimes what we have are followers that are just brand new at their work. They're brand new in the workforce. They're very fresh and young, and they don't really know. They don't have the ability, the skills, or the confidence yet to get in there and just do it on their own. And so that leader is in a situation where they can be in a very much of a directing mode with that particular follower, right? But then you move into situation number 2 above that, where it says coaching. This is still a very high directing, but also a highly supportive behavior. So they're starting to get to a point where, as you can see over here in the green box, the coaching is for people requiring guidance, but there is a 2-way conversation going on there. So your follower in this case is a little bit more capable. They're starting to get their feet under them. They're feeling more confident, but they still need a great deal of directing because they're still new in this job. And it may not just be a new hire. It could be someone that's been in the organization for a long time, but something in their world has changed and they're not quite as focused anymore. They need to have a little bit more coaching to get through the day. We all bring whatever's going on in our lives with us into the workplace, right? I mean, we do not check our our human personness at the door when we don't come into work. And so oftentimes we do bring with us some very difficult situations that we're dealing with that cause us to have less focus in the workplace. And we just need a leader that's going to be able to sort of bolster us up and be there for us and help us to get through the day. Sometimes just getting through the day is a very difficult thing. And a good leader is not going to want to lose one of their team members because they're going through something personal. They're going to help them through that. And so helping them through that might mean that they have to really step into a coaching mode with them. Whereas last week or last month or last year, that person might have been an S4, where they didn't need any coaching at all. They didn't need any guidance at all. They were just, rock stars. But life has a fun way of doing that to us sometimes. So in situational leadership, the leader is going to be intuitive enough to be able to know what's going on with their team members and be able to react to that accordingly. So we move to the yellow square, the one that says supporting. Okay, this person on this team really knows their stuff. They know their job. They know what their responsibilities are. They know what their goals are. They know what the targets are that they have to meet. They know what the expectations are of them, and they know how to get it done. And so the leader in this case is really just there to support them along the way. They're not having to be right over their shoulder on an ongoing basis. They don't have to worry about whether or not they're showing up to work. If their work causes them to have to be off-site a lot, this particular leader is not worried about whether or not they're really out there doing what they're supposed to be doing, because this is the type of person that is trustworthy, they're capable, and all the leader needs to do is support them along the way. Proof is in the pudding, as they say. The results and the progress and the hitting of the goals or the successes along the way will show whether or not that staff member is doing the type of work that they're expected to do. And then finally, in situation number 4, at this point, very low supportive, very low directive behavior from the leader. Oftentimes, members of teams that are in the delegating place where their work has been delegated to them, they're leaders themselves. They, for the most part, probably have team members of their own that they're directing and leading. And so his or her leader knows that they're getting the job done. They know what they're doing. They don't need any sort of day-to-day interaction. You touch base, you might have weekly meetings, whatever your structure is, to hear what's going on and debrief with each other back and forth. And someone in this particular mode might also be doing a little bit of lateral leading themselves or leading up with their boss. Okay. So that's situational leadership. I touched on this, but I'd like you all to keep in mind that members of teams find themselves in certain situations for whatever reason from time to time where they might need more or less directing from their leader. And it's the leader's job to know those things, to be intuitive enough and aware enough, have listened to enough of those water cooler conversations to know what's going on in the lives of their followers so that they can in turn really lead them in a manner that's going to be helpful for them. And so all we're saying here is that a good situational leader is one that isn't going to have a cookie cutter approach with their team. They're not going to lead the entire team in the same exact way because each individual member of their team is in fact an individual. And they bring to the table their own individual needs and strengths and weaknesses. So as a summary, situational leaders consider the varying needs of their employees. They are flexible and responsive to individual circumstances, and they embrace work-life balance. They rely on intuition as well as intellect. They will try new approaches, and in doing so, they are willing to fail and or pivot as needed. And what we're saying here is, sometimes a leader, you find yourself in a situation that you've never experienced before with members of your team. It's like, there's some real serious and interesting things that come into play in people's lives that they bring with them into the workplace. And a leader might find themselves needing to try something that they've never had to try before just to be able to save that person on that team, just be able to help them get through it and to still maintain their position or their job in the organization. And something that a leader tries to, in order to accommodate that situation, may not work, but that's okay. A situational leader is willing to do that. A situational leader is willing to set aside what the actual needs of this particular project or the goal that we have set for ourselves. Those needs are set aside for the benefit of this team member for the moment. And so they might try something that doesn't work. They might have to try something different or pivot in a completely different direction before perhaps having to take the step of suggesting that perhaps this is the right time and place for that particular team member to be. And this is, of course, what I would imagine most all leaders want to avoid having to do. It's hard to find good team members that are able to grow with your organization and stay with your organization and flourish within your organization. It's up to a good leader to be there to support them even in the tough times. And sometimes that might be to the detriment of what's going on business-wise. A situational leader might have to look in other directions to other team members to pick up the slack while they're helping this other team member get through whatever it is that they're going through. Okay, another leadership style that you might want to draw from in your leadership style playbook is participative leadership. As I said before, this is often thought of as democratic leadership. So participative leaders seek the input of their team members But at the end, ultimately, the decision-making responsibility still lies on the leader. So however a participative leader wants to approach a decision-making process, in the end, they are responsible for that decision and the outcomes because of the decision. Here you have a continuum, and at the far left end is the autocratic decision maker. So this is not participative leadership. Okay, so this is the far extreme. This is where we begin with an autocratic style of leadership where Josh talked about it this morning in a military example that he gave. It's like there was a tough situation and that military leader had to make a decision and then they move forward. There is not time to sit around and have a kumbaya moment. There is not time to sit around a round table and consider each other's ideas and perspectives on that particular issue. And this happens with us in our organizations on an ongoing basis. We find ourselves sometimes in a situation where a leader needs to make a decision and move forward, okay? But then you move from there more toward the participative style of leadership, and you see where it says consultative decision-making. In this instance, the leader is going to want to hear from the members of the team. They're going to sit around. They do want to have that roundtable discussion and look at every aspect and see what members of the team have to say about it from their own perspectives. There's diversity in most organizations, and those diverse members of the team bring diverse perspectives to the conversation, and that's very valuable, especially in the global society within which we now live and work. So a consultative decision-making process is talking about a participative leader who wants to hear from those members of the team and then take all those insights and perspectives into consideration when he or she gets ready to make the decision. And then you move a little bit further down that spectrum and you see the next box that says joint decision-making. Okay, this is pushing that envelope a little bit more toward having a fully democratic form of leadership. So joint decision-making, you still have the consultation mode, you hear from everyone, and you ask the members of the team to share with you as the leader the ultimate decision on how things are going to go. You know, what decisions are going to be made. What targets are we going to set for next month's goals? You know, where do you guys feel we need to be? Where do you think we can get to as a team? And have them all jointly together make that decision. Keeping in mind that the ultimate decision is still the responsibility of the leader, even if he or she shared the decision-making with the team, right? If the team makes a really lousy decision about where they want to set their marks for the next month and they don't meet those goals, guess where the buck stops? Still stops with the leader. So a participative leader has to be sure that when they get into the mode of joint decision making, they have to be pretty confident that they have the type of team that they can count on to help make a really good decision that's going to be a successful one for them. And then finally, at the end, delegated decision making. This is the ultimate. This is at the very far opposite end of that spectrum from autocratic decision making, where the leader actually relinquishes the responsibility for making the decision to one or more members of the team. And once that team member or that group of team members makes a decision, then the leader supports that decision and goes forward with that decision. If it works, great. You know, everyone gets to celebrate having been a part of making something really amazing happen. If it doesn't work so great, once again, the leader will take responsibility for that and then make changes the next time around. Okay. So that's kind of what we're talking about with participative leadership. Just to review very quickly, before I actually talk about these bullet points, let me talk about the graphic on the screen. This one over here at the top. If you can see what that graphic says, in the middle, it says subject. And all the other circles around the outside, every one of those little circles, it says knower, K-N-O-W-E-R, knower. And so I really loved this graphic. The way I interpret this one, it tells me that first of all, whatever the subject at hand is, the decision point is the subject in the middle. And all those knowers around the outside, those are the team members. And what that's telling me is that a participative leader has set up in his or her shop an environment where every member of the team knows everything there is to know about that subject. So they are all knowers. So you notice the little double-sided arrows pointing from the knowers to the subject. That's what that's telling me. They know everything there is to know about that particular subject. But you also notice that there are arrows double-sided pointing from knower to knower. And so what that says to me is that everybody on the team knows everything that everybody else on the team knows. Okay, they've heard from each other, they know everyone's perspective. There's been a lot of discussion before any decision is made on this particular subject. It's an extremely transparent mode of decision making and leading a team through any particular action or activity. I love that. I think it's just a wonderful approach to take if you are in a participative leadership environment or you want to be. And keep in mind, I'm sharing with you guys a variety of leadership styles. I'm not suggesting that you have to pick one and stick with that leadership style and go forward with that on an everyday basis. This is your leadership styles playbook. This is an opportunity for you to pick and choose from all these leadership styles that I'm sharing with you, and there are many more out there, and use them as needed and when needed, and switch back and forth. You know, become the kind of leader that can be nimble enough within your organization where you recognize, oh, this is a time for some autocratic decision-making here because we don't have time to really sit around and think about it too much. I'm gonna have to step forward and make a decision. Or, no, this is a time within my organization where I really want to take a situational leadership approach or a participative leadership approach. I want to be a transformational leader. That's my goal in life, but I realize that there are days where I have to be very transactional. So this is all meant to give you a leadership styles playbook so that you can pull from it, utilize the recorded version of this, so the HUBA that will allow you to go back and look at the slides that I've offered for you today and pull from that. But also you can, you know, there's all kinds of information out there about the many leadership styles that are available to us to learn from. And so I encourage you to do that as well. So in summary, participative leaders share info and seek input from others. They want their followers to be heard, valued, and important within the organization. They do work to develop their team members by providing professional development opportunities for them. And they prioritize employee satisfaction. And then, of course, a participative leader is going to have to maintain an open door policy. Otherwise, how are you ever going to be able to hear from them and learn from them and have them hear and learn from you and have a transparent environment if you don't maintain an open door policy? Now, on to the final style of leadership that I'll be talking about with you this morning, and this one is servant leadership. How many of you have never heard of servant leadership? Okay, servant leadership is a relatively new studied form of leadership. It hasn't been widely empirically studied at this point in time compared to some of the other leadership styles, but it is most definitely not a new style of leadership. Servant leadership has been around forever. You can just think about the life of Jesus Christ as a man who walked on this earth, and you can recognize what we might be talking about when we refer to servant leaders. Servant leaders are those who care about serving others first. And they care about serving others more than they care about their own elevation or their own leadership, if you will, titles and that kind of thing. And servant leadership is proven to be very successful in many organizations. Some of the organizations that are well known for having a servant leadership model, undergirding everything that they do, Southwest Airlines, Starbucks, just to name a few, but there are many organizations that have used a servant leadership approach very successfully. Higher education is an example of where you find many servant leaders. You know, professors, administrators, they are there for the purpose of helping young people or those that come back into the educational environment at a later stage of life better themselves. That's our reason for doing what we do, to serve others. Okay, so servant leadership, you can see in this word cloud, these are some of the characteristics of a good servant leader. Conceptualization, building community, stewardship. Stewardship is very important. This is talking about being concerned about the future well-being of an organization, the future well-being of a society or a community. So in the decision-making process, a servant leader is not going to just be concerned about what's the right decision or the best decision that I can make right now for the betterment of this company, for the betterment of the bottom line, no matter what impact that might have negatively on the environment, or no matter what impact that might have on the members of the team, etc. A servant leader, conversely, is going to be concerned about, yes, they're concerned about their success in the day-to-day, but they're also thinking about it futuristically. It's like, if I make this decision today, what impact might that have on future generations or the future of our planet? So a servant leader will be a good steward of the environment in which they operate. They're committed to the success of not only the organization, but of their team. They have foresight, very good listeners. That's key for a servant leader. They engage in healing activities, and this goes back to the situational leadership that we talked about earlier. It's like if members of the team are in a place where they need some support in a healing way, a servant leader will put aside the responsibilities of the organization or the company, maybe ask someone else to step in and take the lead on some things while they tend to the needs of that particular team. Servant leader leaves no one alone. So to hurry up a little bit here, we're getting close to the end of our time together. Servant leaders support and serve the needs of others first. They put their own interests aside. They are active listeners. They are concerned about the future well-being of the organization. They practice caring and healing behaviors with their followers. They are authentic. They build community, and they lead with purpose. I love this graphic. I mean, this servant leader is pinned to the top. He's going to plant that flag. They're going to have success, but he's not doing it alone. He's not getting himself to the top and expecting the others to find their way up there. He's bringing them right along with him. I just love that graphic. And this one on the other side is very nice as well. The servant leader is at the bottom of that particular organizational structure, right? It's like an inverted organizational structure pyramid, with the servant leader at the bottom and all the followers up above it. He's supporting them. He's got them up on his shoulders, unlike the traditional organizational structure, which is usually like this, with the leader at the top and all the team members down below. Robert K. Greenleaf, he's the one that's considered the father of modern servant leadership, the theory of leadership that has been studied and empirically tested. And he said the servant leader is servant first. It begins with the natural feeling that one wants to serve as opposed to wanting power, influence, fame, or wealth. So that kind of sums up what we mean when we say servant leadership. Here are some leadership prompts. I would encourage you to either take a snapshot of this slide or jot down some of these words in your journal or refer back to them later. This is a really great word cloud, I think, to give you some thoughts as to how you might proceed from this talk today and take some of these ideas back into the workplace or back into your organization's volunteer duties, whatever, and use these as prompts for yourself to say, what type of leader do I want to be? And in aspiring to become a better leader, what things are important to me? Do I want to be a good communicator? Do I want to be inspirational? Do I want to have all the goals clearly defined and for the members of the team to know what they are? Am I trustworthy? Do I come into meetings prepared? Am I open, knowledgeable about whatever it is that I'm talking about with my folks? Am I organized or not? You know, are relationships important to me, etc.? What motivators do I use? Extrinsic, intrinsic? Do I switch back and forth? Do I need to worry about that? Am I inclusive, right? Do I want to bring humor into the workplace? So these are just some prompts for you, maybe give you some things to start thinking about. about as you read here. Okay, I don't know that we have very much time for Q&A. These are some of the questions that I wanted to ask of you guys. We do have time for
We have a
Q&A.
few, yeah, we wrap up at 10:50, so we have a few minutes because our next session is at 11. So,
Okay.
yeah, a few minutes.
You've been hearing me talk a lot. I was gonna flip the whole Q&A period up on its head and ask you guys some questions. These are the questions that I would be interested in hearing some answers on from you all. If anybody would like to share in the short time we have left, I'd be very interested in knowing if you have a preferred leadership style and why. It could be one of the ones that I've talked about, or it could be one that's not part of today's presentation. Or if you'd like to answer one of the other questions, please do.
I think you usually have a predominant style, but if you're effective, you need to flex amongst them all. Probably all have developed a predominant style.
Would you like to share yours?
The reason I pause is I'm just looking back where I think I've evolved. Organizations with a lot more of the transactional, and we're trying to be more of a motivational.
Inspirational.
Yeah, actually inspirational, motivational. But a lot of that also depends on your situation. If you have a mature staff, mature followers, versus if you are a new organization, you have a lot of younger first-time folks. You've got to shift down to that, and you have to be a lot more hands-on. I prefer not to be the older I get, but I have some folks that I really got to watch, and others that I'm on both sides of that scale, depending on what on that time as well. There's some who need a lot of day-to-day watching, and others who we can touch base 10 minutes a week, for a brief update. And my biggest job is just if an occasional roadblock comes up, then my job's kind of roadblock out of the way.
Yeah, that's a really good summary of everything we talked about this morning. Anyone? Yes. Archie.
So this makes me think of our elected officials and our communities and candidates and all their different styles too. It's kind of that season right now. So it made me think of how different leaders in our own community are running organizations and those coming up with their style is too. I mean, you can kind of see it in any situation.
You can, and you also, I think you bring up an excellent point, because wherever we are in the world environment, political environment in particular, that has a bearing on what goes on at the local level. And especially with those young members of teams or those young leaders who are coming at it from that particular point of view and perspective. A perspective that those of us who have been around a little bit longer may not have, because we weren't being taught and being exposed to some of these
Innovations.
Yes. Good point.
What's good to see you? What value do you think there is in defining these? So we do something kind of like this with students. What ways do you think it's useful or helpful, or especially for someone who's been in a career 10 years, 20 years, 30 years? How do you think this is fruitful in every day?
Well, I think, first of all, no matter how long you've been in a position of leadership, there's always room for growth and improvement. And so whether it's working with your students or folks that have been in leadership roles for many, many years, if you can come away from a talk like this one today with a new concept related to, let's say, the participative leadership style, for example. Maybe you've been a leader for a long time, but you came up and you were taught how to be a leader at a time where democratic leadership wasn't really the way to do things. You know, it was kind of unheard of. It's like the leader is the almighty power, the buck stops here, and I just need my team to know what I expect of them and look to them to go out and get that done. But as our world evolves and new ideas and concepts come along, a leader that's been around for a long time might need to recognize, like, you know, this particular generation, they're not responding well to my form of leadership. What gives? Well, what gives is you're in a whole different world now than what you were when you started out as a leader. And so I think we all have to continue to evolve and adapt, and sometimes completely pivot and go in the opposite direction because what you've been doing isn't working anymore. Yes, ma'am.
So I think it's interesting with so much virtual going on, how leaders can be leaders when they're not with their team and everything's online and you start the meeting at 8 and then you press the leave meeting at 9 and there's no conversations around anything. So to be a leader in the virtual world is probably completely different. We probably need a sixth one up there.
Yeah, you're right, and you don't have those water cooler moments anymore when you're completely in the virtual world. You don't have that FaceTime or that authentic interaction with your team members as we used to have before. And now that we're mostly in a hybrid situation, I think we still are impacted by that to a certain extent. I'm really glad that we have the technology and that it allows people to be here with us, but it is a different experience. You know, I don't have the opportunity to have a chat box right now to hear what these folks might be thinking and wanting to ask. We value you being here, but you're right, it's very different.
So I would say, thank you so much. I think we need to wrap up so we have a chance to transition, but let's give our presenter a round of applause, please.